Picture this. It's the early 1900s, and there's this young girl staring off the front porch of her house.
Okay.
And she is absolutely desperate to escape a piano lesson. Like, so desperate that she literally hurls herself off the porch.
Wow. That is quite the reaction to a piano lesson.
Right. But she doesn't stick the landing at all. She actually lands on a broken glass milk bottle, and she severely cuts her foot.
Oh, no. That sounds awful.
It was. I mean, she ends up enduring 3 different surgeries. And for 18 months, this little girl cannot even walk properly, let alone dance, which was, her absolute dream.
Which is just a devastating physical and psychological setback, really. I mean, for most kids, an injury that requires that much recovery time it's the permanent end of any athletic ambition.
Yeah. Well,
You usually just adapt to a different kind of life after something like that.
but this girl, she eventually gets back on her feet. And she doesn't just walk, she dances.
And she definitely dances.
She grows up to become one of the most intensely physical, enduringly famous movie stars in all of Hollywood history.
We are, of course, talking about Joan Crawford.
Exactly. We are talking about Joan Crawford. But here is the tragedy of it all and why we're doing this deep dive today. If you know her name right now, there's a very good chance it is not because of her legendary 45-year acting career.
Right. It's probably because of a wire coat hanger.
Yeah. A wire hanger and a sensationalized Hollywood memoir.
She's basically been flattened into this pop culture caricature, like a campy Halloween costume.
And that is exactly what we're here to change today. Welcome to this deep dive. Our mission today is to unpack the really dense, fascinating history of Joan Crawford using the sources we have.
We're trying to get past that caricature to look at the deeply complex, just incredibly resilient human being underneath all of that.
Right, because this is basically the ultimate American rags to riches story. This is a woman who practically willed herself into becoming an icon. She conquered the silent film era, survived the technological bloodbath of the talkies,
And she even dominated a 1950s corporate boardroom.
Yes, and pioneered psychological horror. But to understand the megastar she became, we really first have to examine the identity she left behind.
And the brutal economic realities that forced her to leave it behind.
So let's unpack Lucille Fay Lesueur, born in San Antonio, Texas. Even her birth year is like a mystery.
Yeah, it's debated to be somewhere between 1904 and 1908. She always claimed 1908, but her daughter later claimed 1904.
Right. But right from the jump, her life is just defined by profound instability.
Completely. Her biological father abandons the family when she's only 10 months old.
Wow.
Yeah. And then she is raised partly by a stepfather who runs an opera house in Lawton, Oklahoma. And that's really where little Lucille gets her first taste of the stage, watching vaudeville acts from the wings.
It sort of implants this vision of escape for her.
Exactly. But even that temporary stability vanishes because her stepfather gets accused of embezzlement.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's acquitted, but he gets blacklisted in town, and the family basically has to flee to Kansas City.
Which is where you really start to see her survival instincts forming. Her mother and stepfather separate, and she is placed in a Catholic academy.
But she's not there as a regular student, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
She's not there to learn history or literature. She is a work student. So while the other kids are taking classes, she's spending her days cooking for the staff and scrubbing the school floors just to pay her way.
That is rough.
It is. Her formal education literally never surpassed the primary level.
Which, leaves her with almost zero options for upward mobility in the 1920s. Her only real asset is that intense physical drive to dance.
Right. So she starts as a chorus dancer in these traveling revues, just grinding her way up to Broadway, until finally a producer sends a screen test to Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer.
MGM.
Yeah, MGM. And in 1924, they offer her a contract for $75 a week.
Which is life-changing money for someone who grew up scrubbing floors.
Absolutely life-changing. But the crazy part is, she doesn't even have the cash to get to Los Angeles. She has to borrow $400 just to cover the train fare and basic expenses.
So she arrives in Hollywood already in massive debt.
Exactly. And when she gets there, MGM basically looks at her and says, you've got a great face, but your name is a disaster.
Right, because the head of publicity tells the studio boss that her last name, Lesueur, sounds too much like an open sewer.
Which is just so mean.
It really highlights the absolute ownership the studio system had over human beings back then. I mean, they didn't just manage actors, they manufactured them.
Yeah. Because they actually crowdsourced a new name for her through a magazine contest, right?
They did. It was a contest called Name the Star, and the winning entry was Joan Crawford.
And she hated the name. She said it sounded like crawfish.
She did, yeah.
But she accepted it for what she called a security. And I look at this, and I just can't help but think about how completely dehumanizing that must have been.
Oh, absolutely.
Like stripping away her literal identity before she is even allowed to step in front of a camera.
Yeah.
I kind of equate it to modern-day reality TV makeovers or like a corporate rebranding.
That's a good comparison.
Yeah. But how does someone internalize that? Was she just playing a character from day one?
Well, I think that is the perfect way to look at it. She didn't passively accept a new name, She used Joan Crawford as a protective vessel.
That makes sense.
Lucille Lesueur was a traumatized, uneducated girl from Texas. Joan Crawford was a brand. And she treated that name as a commodity to be built, relentlessly marketed, and just ruthlessly managed.
And she certainly had to market it herself because MGM wasn't exactly rolling out the red carpet for this new asset. She was getting unbilled parts, mostly acting as a body double for notShe.
And notShe was the studio's biggest star at the time.
Right. So Crawford basically realizes, if they won't promote me, I'm going to promote myself.
And her strategy was pure grassroots marketing. Every afternoon and evening, she would hit the hotels and beach pier dance venues around Hollywood.
Just going out dancing.
Well, entering these massive dance competitions, she'd be doing the Charleston, doing the Black Bottom, and she would just physically dominate them.
Okay, wait. I have to challenge this logic a bit. Because how does winning a local dance contest translate to studio executives suddenly caring about a $75 a week chorus girl?
That's a fair question.
Like, weren't there hundreds of young hopefuls doing the exact same thing in Los Angeles every night?
There were, but you really have to understand the specific PR ecosystem of Hollywood in the 1920s. These hotel dance floors weren't just like local dive bars.
Oh, okay.
They were the social epicenters for the Hollywood elite. Directors, producers, columnists, they were all there drinking and watching.
So it was an industry crowd.
Exactly. By winning these contests consistently with this incredibly intense athletic style of dancing, she wasn't just entertaining locals, she was forcing the industry power brokers to look at her every single weekend. She was literally generating her own press.
Wow, okay. And it forces MGM's hand.
Yeah.
Because in 1928, they cast her in Our Dancing Daughters, and it is a cultural earthquake.
It completely catapults her to stardom.
Yeah, I mean, F. Scott Fitzgerald looked at her and saw the absolute embodiment of the jazz age. He called her the best example of the flapper, gowned to the apex of sophistication.
She became the absolute IT girl of the roaring 20s.
But that level of overnight fame immediately puts her in the crosshairs of notShe, right?
Oh, definitely. And Shearer wasn't just the top star. She was married to Irving Thalberg, who was the head of production at MGM.
That is a tough rival to have.
Very tough. And Crawford was fully aware of the power imbalance. She famously complained, "How can I compete with Norma? She sleeps with the boss."
Oh, wow. She actually said that.
She did. She was a street fighter when it came to studio politics.
But an even bigger threat was coming for both of them, honestly. Something that couldn't be outdanced or outmaneuvered. Because in 1927, The Jazz Singer is released. And suddenly, movies have sound.
The talkies.
Yes, the talkies. And Hollywood is thrown into an absolute panic.
The transition from silent films to talkies is arguably the most brutal technological disruption in entertainment history. It was basically an overnight extinction event for careers.
Just because they had to talk.
Well, transitioning from silent films to talkies wasn't just a matter of speaking loudly. It was like a master painter suddenly being told they had to compose symphonies, and they had exactly 1 year to learn how to read music before they were fired.
Oh, I see.
Plus, early microphones were incredibly primitive. They picked up every flaw, every breath, every twang. Actors with high-pitched voices or thick regional accents were suddenly unemployable.
Because the studios wanted that very specific, aristocratic, theatrical sound.
Exactly.
And Crawford has this thick Southwestern accent from Texas and Oklahoma, combined with, primary school education. She doesn't have the vocabulary or the elocution of a stage actor.
No, she doesn't.
She doesn't give up. She locked herself in her house with a stack of newspapers and a dictionary. And whenever she found a word she didn't know how to pronounce, she would repeat it correctly out loud 15 times.
She completely deconstructs her own voice.
She does. I mean, it's one thing to be a viral sensation of the 1920s, but she essentially had to learn a completely new medium overnight to survive. Doesn't this prove she wasn't just a pretty face, but like a ruthless tactician.
It absolutely proves that. She systematically dismantled her regional dialect and built a new, sophisticated transatlantic voice from scratch.
That is wild.
She treated her vocal cords with the same grueling physical discipline she applied to her dancing. While other silent stars perished because they couldn't adapt or they just assumed their fame would protect them, Crawford viewed survival as a technical problem to be solved.
And she solves it. She transitions seamlessly to sound. She stars in massive hits like Grand Hotel, and she makes 8 hugely successful movies with Clark Gable.
By the mid-1930s, she is Hollywood royalty.
But the culture shifts fast. As we head toward the late 1930s, the flapper persona that made her famous is completely outdated.
The Depression is in full swing.
Exactly. Audiences want different stories, and her relentless drive hits a massive brick wall.
Yeah. In May of 1938, an Independent Theater Owners Association took out a notorious trade ad in the Hollywood Reporter, and they labeled Crawford, along with Greta Garbo, Katharine Hepburn, and some others, as box office poison.
Box office poison.
Yes. Exhibitors were basically signaling the end of an era. They were publicly declaring that audiences were no longer buying tickets to see these specific stars no matter what the movie was.
And a box office poison label is basically a career death sentence.
Yeah.
So for a few years, she flounders at MGM, playing roles she hates. And then, after 18 years of loyalty to the studio that quite literally invented her name, she asks to be released.
Which is a huge move.
Huge. And she buys out the remainder of her own contract for $100,000 in 1943.
That is an incomprehensible amount of money to bet on yourself when the entire industry thinks you are completely washed up.
It was an act of extreme audacity. But she takes that gamble, she signs with Warner Bros. For $500,000. And she zeroes in on a script she desperately wants.
Mildred Pierce?
Yes, Mildred Pierce. But the director, Michael Curtiz, was actively campaigning against her. He actually wanted Barbara Stanwyck.
Curtiz basically told Crawford she was too glamorous, too entrenched in her own persona to play this gritty role, and he demanded she submit to a screen test.
Okay, think about the incredible irony here. Think about the mechanics of this. For 2 decades, she has meticulously built the glamorous, untouchable Joan Crawford corporate brand, right?
Right. She is an institution.
Exactly. And now she has to humble herself like an absolute beginner and test for the role of a hard-boiled, working-class mother. How does someone who has spent 20 years perfecting her lighting and her angles suddenly strip all of that away?
By entirely changing her physical vocabulary. I mean, she didn't just wash her face and put on a plain dress.
What did she do?
She altered her posture, dropping that regal carriage she had perfected for MGM. She lowered the register of her voice, abandoning the polished transatlantic affectation for a much harder, more tired cadence.
She showed Curtiz the exhausted, working-class woman she had actually been back in Kansas City.
Exactly. She tapped into Lucille Lesueur.
And it works. She wins the role, and her performance in Mildred Pierce is a critical and commercial triumph. It completely revives her career, and she wins the Academy Award for Best Actress.
It's the ultimate Hollywood comeback.
It really is, and she rides that wave through the 40s and 50s. But, you know, Hollywood aging being what it is, the leading lady roles eventually dry up again.
But she doesn't just fade into retirement, though. She pivots to an entirely different arena where she can exert control.
The corporate boardroom.
Yes.
Yeah.
In 1955, she marries Alfred Steele, the president and later chairman of the Pepsi-Cola Company.
Right, and when he passes away in 1959, she becomes the first female on the board of directors. And she wasn't just a ceremonial mascot, you know.
No, not at all.
I compare this to modern celebrity brand ambassadors like Ryan Reynolds or Rihanna. But Crawford was decades ahead of her time. And she wasn't just holding a can of soda on a billboard.
She was intimately involved in the logistics of the business. By 1966, she was traveling over 100,000 miles a year for Pepsi.
That is a grueling amount of corporate travel.
It really is. She was strategizing regional distributions, charming local bottlers, micromanaging PR events in different markets.
She applied the exact same relentless technical work ethic to selling soda that she had applied to surviving the transition to sound films.
And she even won something called the Pally Award for boosting sales. She was operating in male-dominated corporate spaces in the 50s and 60s, using her celebrity as actual leverage for market share.
But she still hadn't completely abandoned Hollywood, right? Because in the early 1960s, she pioneers a completely new genre for older actresses.
Psychological horror.
Yes. Whatever happened to Baby Jane? in 1962.
It was a masterstroke of casting. She recognized that the public was still absolutely obsessed with the feuds of Hollywood's golden age.
Oh, for sure.
And she weaponized that real-life tension by actually suggesting her lifelong rival, Bette Davis, for the co-starring role.
That is genius. They played these aging, deeply toxic sisters trapped in a house together. And the movie was a gargantuan hit. It recouped its entire budget in just 11 days.
But this late career renaissance also leads to one of the most painful moments in her professional life.
Yeah, this part is tough. During the filming of a follow-up movie, Hush Hush, Sweet Charlotte, Crawford becomes ill and enters a hospital.
Right.
And while she's recovering, the director, Robert Aldrich, replaces her with Olivia de Havilland.
It's a brutal reminder of the limits of her control. The industry that she had given her entire life to, the system she had constantly outmaneuvered. It ultimately disposed of her without a second thought.
And the way she found out is awful. She found out she was fired by listening to the news on the radio in her hospital bed.
She didn't even get a phone call.
No. She later said she cried for 9 hours straight. To have fought for absolute control for 40 years only to have it ripped away over the radio is just devastating.
But, you know, that ferocious need for control, the exact thing that saved her career in Hollywood, became a profoundly destructive force the minute she stepped off the movie set and into her own home.
Right, because the absolute management of the Joan Crawford brand spilled over into her personal life, which leads to the most fiercely debated aspect of her legacy.
Her family life.
Yeah. She was married 4 times. Douglas Fairbanks Jr., Franchot Tone, Philip Terry, and Alfred Steele. But she also desperately wanted to be a mother.
And because she was a single woman for periods of this time, California law wouldn't let her adopt.
So she bypassed the system. She went through brokers in Nevada and other states. She eventually adopted 5 children. But that first attempt is just a harrowing story.
It really is. In the early 1940s, she adopted a baby boy. But just 10 days later, the child's biological mother tracked Crawford down.
10 days later.
Yeah. And when the mother realized a wealthy celebrity had adopted her baby, she basically attempted to extort Crawford for money.
Really?
Crawford was ultimately forced to return the child, which obviously inflicted massive emotional trauma.
She does go on to adopt 4 more children, though. Christina, Christopher, and twin girls, Kathy and Cindy.
Right.
But her relationship with the 2 eldest, Christopher and Christina, becomes entirely fractured. When Crawford dies, she completely disinherits them, writing in her will that it was for reasons which are well known to them.
And then a year after her death, in 1978, Christina publishes Mommie Dearest.
The tell-all memoir.
Yes, and the memoir alleged severe emotional and physical abuse. It painted Crawford as a tyrannical, unhinged mother who was obsessed with control, cleanliness, and public image above all else.
And it was a massive bestseller. It fundamentally altered the public's perception of her almost overnight.
It really did.
But here is where history fractures into 2 completely different realities. Because on one hand, you have Christina's harrowing accounts of midnight tirades and wire hangers. But on the exact same timeline, you have fierce pushback from her other children.
Her twin daughters.
Yeah, Kathy and Cindy. They completely rejected the narrative. Kathy actually went on national television calling the book a great work of fiction, and she even sued Christina for defamation later on.
Wow.
Kathy described Crawford as a warm mother and a good friend.
And that dichotomy extends to her Hollywood peers as well, you know?
Yeah.
People who worked intimately with her were totally divided. Rivals like Bette Davis and friends like Myrna Loy publicly defended Crawford.
Even Bette Davis.
Even Bette Davis. They suggested Christina was living in a fantasy world driven by the bitterness of being disinherited.
Interesting.
But others acknowledged that Crawford was an incredibly strict, demanding disciplinarian, perhaps far too strict, but they denied witnessing outright abuse.
So how do we, as people looking back at history, reconcile these 2 wildly different versions of the same woman? Like, was she a monster behind closed doors, or was she a strict but loving mother targeted by a bitter child?
Honestly, if we view this through the lens of human complexity, the contradiction begins to make a terrifying kind of sense. Well, think about the exact same relentless, uncompromising drive that allowed a poor girl from Texas to survive the studio system, master sound films, and command a corporate boardroom. That level of intensity is not something you can just switch off at 5 p.m.
Yeah, that makes sense.
A woman who views her entire existence as a brand to be ruthlessly managed might view her children as extensions of that brand, making her an exceedingly difficult, demanding parent. But the sheer volume of conflicting testimonies proves that her legacy cannot be reduced to just one single narrative.
Which brings us to the final moments of her life, and a revelation that complicates her story even further.
Right.
Crawford passed away in May of 1977 from a heart attack, living quietly in New York City. And aside from the disinheritance we mentioned, the reading of her will revealed something truly astonishing about her hidden life.
Yeah, following her death, it came to light that for years, Crawford had been secretly paying the hospital rooms and medical bills for hundreds of destitute, down-on-their-luck members of the film industry.
Hundreds of people.
Hundreds. Aging character actors, former crew members, basically people who had been chewed up and discarded by the exact same system she had managed to survive.
And here's the crucial detail for me. She never publicized it. She explicitly instructed that her name be kept off the paperwork. She didn't want the public, or even the patients themselves, to know she was the one paying.
That is incredible.
She also left her massive estate to her twin daughters and a host of charities, like the American Cancer Society, the USO, the Muscular Dystrophy Association.
So she was quietly redistributing her wealth to care for the forgotten people of her industry, while simultaneously maintaining this armor-plated public persona.
Exactly. So what does this all mean for you listening right now? I want to leave you with a lingering thought experiment about the mechanics of legacy.
It's really a question of who ultimately owns a person's history.
If Christina Crawford had never written Mommie Dearest, how would you remember Joan Crawford today? Would she be universally celebrated as the ultimate American pioneer?
A woman who overcame profound childhood instability, forced Hollywood to bend to her will, mastered the corporate boardroom, and quietly, generously cared for the vulnerable.
Is it possible for a single sensational book to completely overwrite 45 years of sheer, undeniable willpower?
It forces us to ask what we choose to remember about our cultural icons and why we're so quick to embrace the caricature over the complex human.
Think about that little girl in Texas, leaping off the front porch, shattering the milk bottle, and facing 18 months of agony. She didn't let a broken foot stop her from dancing, and she didn't let a broken system stop her from ruling the world. What do you think her true legacy should be?